Hello and welcome to Fire of Learning. In the next few videos, we're going to be doing an analysis of the Myers-Briggs types. Myers-Briggs types are classifications which highlight general preferences for various perspectives and decision-making processes. The letters you see on the surface are based off the cognitive functions developed by Swiss psychologist Carl Jung in the early 20th century. There are 16 types, and generally, and for the purposes of this video and the following videos, they are divided into four main categories: the SJs, the SPs, the NFs, and the NTs. Though of course other ways of classification exist. But not to keep you all waiting for the SJ analysis here, for more basic information on this subject, you may find information on the meaning of the letters and the cognitive functions on videos I've made on my channel, and I will provide you with links in the description for more information and links to numerous tests which you may take to correctly identify your type, although be careful of some tests on the internet because some tests are more concerned with what they can make off you than correctly identifying your type. So, without further ado, the SJs. The SJ category consists of the ESTJ, the ISTJ, the ESFJ, and the ISFJ. They are defined, of course, by the shared preference for S, sensing, and J, judgment. We'll get into the underlying cognitive functions in a moment, but for now it will be sufficient to say that, like all sensors, they have a focus on practical thought and immediate sensory information. They are more likely to distrust intuitive feelings or their gut feelings and have a preference for more down-to-earth concepts, and they live their lives accordingly. Like all judgers, they operate with a larger focus on the external environment and their participation in it, leading them to appear on the outside to prefer to be organized and structured. Often they will try to develop plans for things, and they will place great emphasis on sticking to a plan. The SJ has a tendency to place a strong emphasis on tradition and a relative system of values which are often shared between members of a certain community, be it religious, cultural, national, ethnic, or otherwise. The emphasis is placed largely because they believe that these traits, such as honesty, integrity, and a good work ethic, are necessary for the functioning of their group or society. They are, as mentioned, very structured and organized, and in fact perhaps the most structured and organized of all four categories. Hard workers, pragmatists, and they are usually very serious about their undertakings in lives. From the viewpoints of other types, they may be too serious, on a level anywhere from being the goody two-shoes of the friend group to being a rigid dictator at work. With much of their behavior being in accordance with their traditional value systems, they often end up in careers where they may be exercised, such as teachers, police officers, soldiers, politicians, businessmen or women, counselors, managers, and directors, and so forth, with some considerable difference in job choice between STJs and SFJs. In environments in which SJs feel that the core values are not threatened, they may draw on their weaker intuition functions and be fun, playful, or adventurous, displaying a sense of humor and creativity. However, they are not always so laid back. Their adherence to their value system, and especially the fact that they expect that others adhere to common value systems as well, can sometimes make them seem rigid, uncompromising, and short-sighted. An SJ under stress or otherwise psychologically unhealthy may be very abrasive to new ideas or other insights, especially if it threatens their image of society, a preferred way of doing things. They may become very quickly critical or even combatant with people who stray from their expectations of how people should act, condemning anything from the equivalent to a tattoo to a rejection of a conventional political or religious belief. This is not always the case, though, and mature SJs know when to be, and are capable of being, flexible and open-minded. With SJs making up large portions of the world population, especially in Europe, the US, and Canada, where they constitute about half the population generally, this is an important type to understand. So let's do some digging beneath the surface of what we've just described and get to the underlying cognitive functions responsible for their behavior. Here, again, are the four types, and here are their defining cognitive functions. Now, if you don't know what these letters mean exactly, that's fine. I will explain them here in this video, although, as I said, a more detailed analysis of them can be found in the cognitive functions video that I did. So, as you can see, SJs lead with SI, and combine it with either TE or FE, extroverted thinking or feeling, and they have a preference for either one of these. To match, logically, their weaker functions would be the opposite of the preferred behavior and with a different focus. Accordingly, they follow with NE, extroverted intuition, and either FI or TI, introverted feeling or thinking. So, how do these four functions compare with the four letters everyone is used to seeing? Well, the correlation isn't immediately obvious, but I'll show you guys the correlation here that admittedly took me a bit to discover when I first got into this, and this is true of all types. This is how all types are built. So whether your lead function here is extroverted or introverted, and you can tell that by the I or the E following the main letter, the capitalized letter, it determines whether or not you are an extrovert or an introvert. Two of your functions, sensing and intuition, are perceiving functions, and the other two, thinking and feeling, are judging functions. Whether you prefer intuition to sensing or vice versa makes you an N or an S. Whether you prefer thinking to feeling or vice versa makes you a T or an F. Finally, if your judging function, again, either thinking or feeling, is extroverted and your perceiving function is introverted, you're a judger. And this is your main judging function, the one that appears to the left of the function stack. If your judging function is introverted and your perceiving function is extroverted, you're a perceiver, a P. Like an INFP leads with FI, so they're a perceiver, but an ISFJ leads with FE, so they're a judger. You can see how this contributes to the SJs here, but let's take a look at what this function stack means specifically for the SJs. So extroverts back their extroverted judging function with introverted sensing, and introverts back their introverted sensing with their judging function. But what is introverted sensing all about? Well, obviously it's a defining characteristic of the SJ, but what is it? Well, SI is a perceiving function which stores, categorizes, and importantly connects sensory information. In essence, it's pattern recognition developed by trial and error and smoothed out by the simple passage of time and age. SIs are very good at noticing facts and details and remembering them and comparing them to what's going on in the present. Now, obviously, everyone does this as everyone uses all the functions we'll discuss. It doesn't make sense for a normally functioning human to be without one of these functions, but the SI leads here prefer to navigate the world with this perceiving function. This ability of pattern recognition can be a good thing, but it can also lead to very illogical conclusions on a small and large scale. For example, if you feel a sudden next thing as soon as you enter a forest, SI may notice a correlation, but will disregard it. If it happens a second time, though, or even a third time, SI will be sure of a correlation, but the problem is that the SI lead may believe that the sting is a direct result of entering the forest. Keep in mind, this is just a simplified example of an irrational association which may be made on a complex scale. Most people aren't this stupid. Now, obviously, there is a correlation between entering a forest and receiving neck pain, but it's irrational to believe that simply entering a forest causes neck pain because there's no objective reason to believe that sort of thing, no scientific evidence, nothing of that sort. And someone who uses SI as an inferior function like an ENFP or an INTP, having endured this situation multiple times and noticing a direct correlation, will immediately begin to search for other possibilities, more reasonable possibilities than just what they observe to be happening. But it would definitely be hard to overcome this illogical association in an SI lead and SJ whose primary focus is linking sensory data. A prime example of a negative aspect of this is like the majority of Sigmund Freud's psychology. Many people suggested Sigmund Freud was an ISTJ because a lot of his work just seems to have been developed by these correlations which he just perceives to be true but don't really hold up in objective scientific study. And this is of course something an SJ would have to be careful of. A strong SI leaves a weaker NE, extroverted intuition. NE has to do with abstract concepts and idea generation, aka brainstorming, and idea comprehension. Generally speaking, NE is what makes SJ somewhat quirky or goofy, having some unconventional interests, but of course it is not dominant in their decision-making processes. It's used mostly when encouraged or necessary, especially when SI is not sufficient. In day-to-day life, however, the weaker NE is responsible for what other types, specifically intuitive leads, see as rigidity, stubbornness, and short-sightedness. But now for the difference between the STJs and SFJs, thinkers and feelers. Now, as is stressed in dealing with Myers-Briggs type, studies do not really show a difference in intelligence here between thinkers and feelers. Intelligence generally influences other functions more. Thinkers are not necessarily unempathetic jerks, and feelers are not wildly emotional. It has to do with thinkers making decisions based on objective impersonal criteria, and feelers on ethics and understanding of human relations and placing themselves within those human relations, and generally the two types will act accordingly. As mentioned, Js have an extroverted judging function, so for the STJs this is TE, and for SFJs this is FE, and again, if the SJ prefers this function over SI, they're an extrovert, and vice versa, introvert. In the ISFJ and ESFJ, and in general, FE is concerned with the feelings and welfare of people around them. How they feel personally may be much more strongly related to how the people around them are feeling, and in FE leads like SFJs, they are typically very interested in people, and develop a modus operandi accordingly. They're definitely skilled with other people in picking up on their feelings. ESFJs can be very suave and entertaining. Some ISFJs may at times seem somewhat socially anxious, but are still generally very skilled with people, to the point at which they may sometimes be confused for extroverts. But an FE perspective is not limited to just trying to make people feel happy or good. On a larger scale, much of their thought process is concerned with what they believe to be the ideal interactions between mankind and doing things which they believe will bring society as a whole forward, and accordingly they are very attracted to things like ethics They have much of a focus on rather an understanding of their place within things rather than trying to connect with themselves like an FI would be. On a more focused interpersonal level though, they are drawn to helping other people improve themselves at a deeper level. This concern is not always welcomed though, and some may find it to be intrusive, especially if the SFJ type overdoes it, focusing intensely on the welfare of others. At their worst, FE leads can use their understanding of interpersonal relations to become manipulative or controlling, but generally this is not common. And usually if the behavior is present, it's more limited. With these traits present, SFJs can make excellent teachers, leaders, therapists, counselors, medical professionals, types of managers, and have other similar jobs. Furthermore, to note, SFJs will have a tertiary or inferior TI, introverted thinking, in which they logically sort information and structure it into a system. However, this function is very commonly superseded by SI and FE, and SFJs will usually only prefer impartiality in accordance with what their TI reasons when under stress or by necessity or encouragement. STJs with extroverted thinking, TE, are less touchy-feely. TE is a focus on organizing external environments in accordance with logic but with strong emphasis on efficiency. TE leads are very good at analyzing circumstances or data, removing what is unnecessary or even impeding, especially impeding, and forming a plan to maximize efficiency off what is left, which is why STJs are generally the most organized of all the types. However, not everyone always welcomes this organizational drive, especially when it's people being organized by an STJ, as STJs may appear bossy or hard-headed to others, especially in the workplace. Sometimes this is indeed the case, but often STJs aren't aware of how bossy they may seem. They expect efficiency and hard work in themselves and accordingly hold others to that same expectation, not because they enjoy being drill sergeants, but because they believe that it is necessary for the functioning of whatever they're concerned with, be it a small project like house maintenance or even society as a whole. At their worst, though, STJs can completely disregard emotions in their organizational efforts and may become cold-hearted in certain situations, especially under stress. Though this is not always the case, and matured STJs recognize that the well-being of others is important in analyzing circumstances or information. With these traits, STJs are excellent organizers and managers in any field, e.g. politics, education, societal jobs like police and military, etc. Furthermore, to note, STJs have an inferior or tertiary introverted feeling function, FI, which concerns personal values and morality and a connection to their true identity. This is different from the values developed by SI because it's more concerned with personal identity and feeling. The difference is much more distinguishable when we talk about FI leads like an ISFP or an INFP. You'll see SJs in general are very concerned with how they're seen by others and how society judges them. FI leads, like those two types we mentioned, are going to act more independently. They're not really going to care what society thinks about them in certain circumstances. But an STJ may sometimes make decisions based on inherent values and a sense of self when under stress or when it is encouraged. But often this is repressed by SI and TE, and the weakness of this function may leave STJs wondering more about their own personal identity and sense of self. So, in conclusion, SJs are stereotypically structured people who often act in accordance with a system of values often related to tradition. This makes them hard-working, organized, practical, honest, and loyal people, and they expect these traits to be exhibited by others as well, and will encourage it in them because they believe it is necessary for the healthy functioning of society. There is a bit of adventurousness and quirkiness about them, especially when they are comfortable and healthy. However, when distressed or unhealthy, they may become stubborn, critical, unrelaxed, intrusive, hard-headed, or bossy. They may become far too concerned with social status and struggle to change their mind on certain things even when it becomes necessary. SJs looking to improve on their drawbacks should recognize these facts, as defeating them can easily pave the way for them to achieving their highest aspirations and becoming their ideal selves. So to finish off, here are some fun statistics regarding SJs. SJs make up 46.4% of the US population. The ISFJ, the most common type, is 13.8%. The ESFJ is 12.3%, the ISTJ is 11.6%, and the ESTJ is 8.7%. SFJs constitute 1/3 of all women in America, and STJs are 1/3 of all men in America. Famous ISFJs include Robert E. Lee, Brian May, Mother Teresa, Prince Charles, and Samwise Gamgee from The Lord of the Rings. Famous ESFJs include Pope Francis, Andrew Carnegie, Steve Harvey, Colin Powell, and Hugh Jackman. Famous ISTJs include George Washington, Queen Elizabeth, Robert De Niro, Thomas Hobbes, and Dana Scully from The X-Files. Famous ESTJs include Margaret Thatcher, Alec Baldwin, Bill O'Reilly, St. Paul, and Boromir from The Lord of the Rings. For the upcoming videos on SPs, NFs, and NTs, and for future videos on a wide variety of interesting subjects, be sure to subscribe to Fire of Learning. Thank you for watching.